You make a lot of assumptions here, but there's one I'm not going to let you get away with.
Oh no, I can't wait to hear more poorly thought out, culturally ignorant claims from a girl who gets all of her arguments from Facebook memes.
That's the fact that you think you know exactly what this woman wanted. She could have also been benefiting from the sex, and she could have also not wanted a child. We don't know that.
So for context, earlier today I made a video critiquing a Skeptical Heretics video in which she says that God killed a man simply for pulling out during sex. This was in reference to the story of Onan in Genesis 38. Her main response is what you just saw in that last clip, which is to claim that I just don't know what the woman wanted. And this is false. I can be confident that the woman wanted a child for two reasons. First, in general, her having a child was directly related to her ability to survive and have cultural standing. By not giving her a child and keeping her as a widow with neither husband nor child, Onan was effectively sentencing her to an extremely harsh life and shame in her community. By not giving Tamar a child, Onan was robbing her of the land rights that would have gone to her husband. This is because the land rights would be held by Onan until it could be inherited by Tamar's child. The land rights she would have acquired through her heir would make a significant difference in her ability to survive, and her being a widow with an heir and with land rights would have elevated her social standing above a widow with neither of these. So just in general, in a situation like this, the woman is almost certainly going to want to have a child. The idea of them just having casual sex is anachronistic and culturally tone deaf. The second reason I know she wanted a child is because in that same chapter, it makes it pretty explicitly clear that she wanted a child. Right after this story with Onan, we are told that Tamar dressed up as a prostitute and tricked her father-in-law into sleeping with her so that she could get pregnant with a child. I just want to reiterate that this girl was so desperate for an heir that she pretended to be a prostitute and slept with her father-in-law just so she could get one. But by all means, tell me more about how I can't possibly know she wanted a child. But not only can I clearly know that Tamar wanted a child, it wouldn't affect my argument if I couldn't, but it would affect your argument. Your original argument was that this is a case of divine injustice. So long as there is a plausible explanation in which this is actually God defending a helpless widow, then the only way you could maintain your original argument is if you showed that my explanation isn't what happened. But supposedly we can't know what Tamar wanted, so you kind of just shot yourself in the foot there.
Because women had no power back then. They didn't have a choice.
This is wrong and ironic. It's wrong because women did have some power in this culture. The blanket statement that all women in this time period had no choice in who they married is not supported by the data. And this is ironic because Onan refusing to give Tamar a child was actively robbing her of her power. So you were complaining that women didn't have power and then complaining about when God punishes a guy who was robbing a woman of her power.
Truly, you have a dizzying intellect.
And that's why I don't think it's very reasonable that God killed somebody just because they didn't want to have their own kid.
This verse never says that Tamar didn't want to have a kid. It's odd that you went from, I can't possibly know what the woman wants, to all of a sudden, you know what the woman wants?
And you do think that's reasonable, and that is fine.
I think it's reasonable for God to kill someone for sexually exploiting a widow and robbing her of what is rightfully hers, which is what everything in this passage indicates is going on.
Are we really going to act like you care about the sexual exploitation of women in the Bible? Because if you did, you would have a real problem with when Moses told his men that he could take the virgins for themselves. Or when the Bible says a rapist can pay the girl's dad to marry her.
So now Skeptical Heretic is engaging in what's called a red herring fallacy. This is when you throw out things that are not relevant to the original point in order to distract your interlocutor from the original topic and to get them arguing about something different. She starts her video with this, and it's pretty damning when you have to resort to this strategy, but I'm having so much fun, and since your other arguments don't have a leg to stand on, let's just go ahead and address these as well. First of the verses presented is Numbers 31, in which Moses says to Israel to take the virgins for yourself. The context here is that this tribe was just completely killed for leading the Israelites to perform idolatrous acts which were sexual in nature. As a result, the tribe was punished with death. All were supposed to be killed, but the Israelites captured the women and brought them back, which angered Moses. The virgins were spared because as virgins they clearly did not participate in the sexual immorality that the tribe was being punished for. If all the men in their tribe had just been killed, which they had, leaving the young young girls by themselves would have likely resulted in their death. So it's either kill them, leave them to die, or take them with you. So Moses allows the Israelites to keep those who, again, clearly did not participate in the original problematic issue. There is nothing in this verse that indicates rape or sexual exploitation. That is something that you are reading into the text. The Israelites could have kept them as servants or married them later on. Next is the claim that a rape victim was required to marry her rapist. This is not the case. She cites Deuteronomy 22:28 through 29 here. First, this verse is probably not referring to rape. The only translation that renders it that way is the NIV, which I think is a mistranslation on their part. The word here means simply to grab or latch onto, and is used in the Old Testament in a number of non-sexual instances. Second, Deuteronomy 22:28 should be read in light of the parallel law in Exodus 22:16, which it makes it more clear that this is likely referring to something more akin to seduction. Exodus 22:16 also makes it clear that the father had the right to refuse the marriage, and other Jewish texts indicate that the girl had the right of refusal. The woman was not compelled to marry the man. Rather, the man was compelled to marry the woman if she wished. This law makes it so that if a man sleeps with a woman and robs her of her virginity, which would have been a big deal back then, he has to take responsibility for his actions by taking care of the woman for the rest of her life. But this does not say that she was forced to marry her rapist. So suggesting that this is sexual exploitation is stupid. So once again, skeptical heretic, you do not have a single leg to stand on.